think one of the reasons why political scientists think that face-to-face diplomacy is oftentimes irrelevant is they have this view, which is that at the end of the day, the intentions of other people reside in their minds, right? So we're not mind readers. We can't really, know with any degree of precision or certainty what another person is thinking. And because of that, because your intentions are just, sort of hidden behind the brain and hidden behind the skull, you can't access them. And so we're always kind of guessing about what other leaders intend, what other people are meaning with the words that they use, and so on and so forth. So political scientists really highlight this problem of intentions, which is really the problem of the ability to communicate what your intentions are. I get asked a lot about Donald Trump and his diplomatic style and whether some of the personality characteristics or dispositions or character traits that he has might lend themselves to better diplomacy or weaker diplomacy or something in between. One of the things I tell my students in the classroom is that I'm really good, or I like to think that I'm really good at sort of analyzing interactions and people in the past, but it's only because we have so much more data than we do in the present. I mean, one of the things that people bring up a lot is Donald Trump seems to display a relatively high level of narcissism. Now, one of the things I should point out is that scholars have looked at narcissism as a personality trait and have basically argued that leaders in general tend to be more narcissistic than the general population, and I think for reasons that are pretty reasonable and easy to grasp. The key question, though, is whether Trump is more narcissistic than average with respect to leaders and what this might mean. One of the interesting findings in psychology is that narcissism tends to be inversely correlated with deception detection abilities, which simply means that the more narcissistic you are, it's likely that you're less likely to pick up on the deception clues and cues that you get in face-to-face interactions. One of the things that people worry about with the meeting with Kim, for example, is that Kim would tell them that we are planning to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, we're going to dismantle our nuclear program, and that if Trump bought it and ended up being wrong and made decisions based on that understanding, that the United States would ultimately be in trouble. So people are very much worried about Trump's ability to pick up on deception, as they should be with any leader. And given that, at least publicly, Trump appears to have, sort of a narcissistic or a bit of a narcissistic personality, I think some of that concern might be well-founded. One of the more important discoveries in social neuroscience in the last couple decades has been this idea that we actually have fairly refined access to the minds of other people. There's a system in the brain that a lot of people talk about as the mirroring system, which basically means that in face-to-face interactions, we're actively sort of simulating for ourselves what goes on in the brains of another person. And there are discrete neurons in the brain that actively allow us to do this with one another. So at the end of the day, I think that the neuroscience really brings to the table a different way of thinking about face-to-face interaction that political scientists really haven't appreciated over the last several decades, and I think it's recausing us to think about the value of face-to-face diplomacy.